There are moments in history when the warnings become so clear that ignoring them is no longer ignorance. It is a choice. We are living in one of those moments right now. Events are accelerating. Patterns are emerging. And the signs that something monumental is approaching are no longer hidden. They are everywhere. But most people are not paying attention. They are distracted, comfortable, or in denial. This is not a message about fear. This is a message about awareness. Because if you understand what is happening, if you can see the signs, if you recognize the truth behind the chaos, then you can prepare. You can make different choices. You can position yourself spiritually, mentally, and emotionally for what is coming. But if you ignore the warnings, if you continue living as if everything is normal, then you will be caught off guard when the shift happens. If you want to understand the 5 truths you need to know before Judgment Day arrives, truths that will change how you see the world and how you live your life, then subscribe to this channel right now. Because what you are about to discover is not just information. It is the clarity you need to navigate the most critical time in human history. Global events are accelerating at a pace never seen before. Wars are erupting in regions that were stable for decades. Economies that seemed invincible are collapsing overnight. Natural disasters are increasing in frequency and intensity. Political systems are destabilizing, social structures are fracturing, and all of this is happening simultaneously across continents, across cultures, across belief systems. This is not coincidence. This is convergence. This is the acceleration phase that every prophetic tradition warned about. The phase where time itself seems to speed up, where events that should take years happen in months, where the world changes faster than humanity can adapt. Political changes, wars, and crises leave a clear pattern. If you look at the last decade alone, you will see a pattern that cannot be explained by normal historical cycles. The rise of authoritarianism, the breakdown of international cooperation, the escalation of conflicts that were supposed to be resolved, the resurgence of nationalism and tribalism, the weaponization of technology, the manipulation of information, the erosion of trust in institutions. All of these trends are not random. They are interconnected. They are symptoms of a global system that is reaching its breaking point. And that breaking point is closer than most people realize. These are not coincidences. They are warnings that many pretend not to see. Because acknowledging the warnings requires action. It requires change. It requires admitting that the world you thought you knew is not the world that actually exists. And most people are not ready for that. So they rationalize. They say, things have always been bad. Every generation thinks theirs is the worst. History is cyclical. This too shall pass. But this time is different because the convergence is global, the acceleration is unprecedented, and the systems that kept chaos at bay for the last 70 years are collapsing. There is no historical precedent for what is happening now, and pretending there is will not protect you. The signs are not just external, they are internal. You feel it, everyone does. There is a sense of unease that is not tied to personal circumstances, a feeling that something fundamental has shifted, that the world is not what it was, that stability is an illusion, that the future is uncertain in a way it has never been before. This is not anxiety, this is perception. Your soul recognizes what your mind refuses to accept, that the structures you relied on are fragile, that the assumptions you held are false, that the time you thought you had is running out, and yet the majority continues living as if nothing has changed. They go to work, they watch entertainment, they scroll through feeds, they make plans for a future that assumes continuity. But continuity is no longer guaranteed. The signs are screaming, the warnings are clear, and ignoring them will not make them go away. It will only make you unprepared when they manifest fully, because the signs are not about scaring you. They are about waking you up. They are about giving you time to respond. But that time is finite, and it is shrinking. The question is not whether the signs are real. The question is whether you will acknowledge them, whether you will adjust your life accordingly, whether you will prepare spiritually, mentally, and practically for what is coming. Because the signs are not for everyone. They are for those who are willing to see. And if you are reading this, if this message resonates, then you are one of those people, and you have a responsibility to yourself, to your family, to your soul, to take the signs seriously. Because the world is not going back to normal. Normal is over. And what comes next depends on how you respond to what you see right now. Comment below and tell me, do you see the signs, or do you still believe everything is normal and nothing fundamental has changed? The increase in violence, coldness, and individualism is evident. You do not need statistics to see it. You see it in how people treat each other, in the lack of empathy, in the ease with which cruelty is justified, in the normalization of behaviors that would have been considered unthinkable a generation ago. Violence is not just physical, it is emotional, psychological, relational. People are quicker to attack, slower to forgive, more willing to destroy than to build. And this shift is not limited to certain regions or cultures. It is global. It is pervasive. It is the new baseline of human interaction. Society has lost moral limits and spiritual references. There was a time when shared values provided boundaries, when religion, philosophy, or tradition offered frameworks for right and wrong. But those frameworks have been systematically dismantled, not because they were oppressive, though some were, but because a society without moral limits is easier to control, easier to manipulate, easier to destabilize. And now we live in that society, where truth is relative, where morality is personal, where nothing is sacred. And the result is chaos, because humans cannot function without boundaries. Without them, we descend into tribalism, violence, and self-destruction. This ethical collapse always precedes major historical transitions. Look at Rome before its fall. Look at Europe before the World Wars. Look at any civilization in decline. The pattern is the same. Moral decay, social fragmentation, loss of shared identity, increase in hedonism and nihilism, and then collapse. Not immediately, but inevitably, because a society that abandons its ethical foundation cannot sustain itself. It rots from within. And what we are witnessing now is that rot. Not in isolated pockets, but systemically, across institutions, across nations, across the entire global order. And history shows that when this level of ethical collapse is reached, what follows is not gradual decline, it is catastrophic transformation. The normalization of the abnormal is one of the clearest signs. Things that would have shocked people 10 years ago are now accepted without question. Language that would have been condemned is now celebrated. Behaviors that would have been corrected are now defended. And anyone who points this out is labeled judgmental, intolerant, or hateful. This inversion of values is deliberate, because if you can convince a population that wrong is right and right is wrong, you can control them completely. They will police themselves. They will attack dissenters. They will defend their own enslavement as freedom, and that is exactly what is happening now. The loss of connection is another critical shift. People are more isolated than ever, despite being more connected digitally. Loneliness is epidemic. Trust is collapsing. Community is disintegrating. And in that vacuum, people become vulnerable. Vulnerable to manipulation, vulnerable to extremism, vulnerable to despair. Because humans are not designed to live in isolation. We are designed for connection, for meaning, for purpose. And when those are removed, we become something less than human. We become predictable, controllable, expendable, and that is the goal. Not of some shadowy conspiracy, but of systems that benefit from fragmentation and chaos. The coldness is not just interpersonal, it is institutional. Governments treat citizens as numbers. Corporations treat employees as resources. Media treats audiences as targets, and individuals treat each other as obstacles or tools. There is no warmth, no humanity, no recognition of the sacred in the other. And this coldness is the soil in which totalitarianism grows. Because a population that does not care about each other will not resist when authority becomes tyrannical. They will comply, they will inform, they will participate in their own oppression, and they will do it believing they are on the right side. The shift in human behavior is not accidental. It is the result of decades of conditioning, of erosion of values, of systematic destruction of what makes us human. And it is accelerating. Every year, the coldness deepens, the violence increases, the individualism hardens. And if this trajectory continues, what remains will not be a society. It will be a collection of isolated, fearful, controllable individuals with no capacity for resistance, no memory of what was lost, and no hope for what could be. Hit that like button if you recognize this shift and understand why it matters more than most people realize. Ancient prophecies describe scenarios we now see in the news. Religious texts, mystical writings, and prophetic traditions from different cultures all point to a convergence of events that signal the end of an age. Wars and rumors of wars, natural disasters increasing, knowledge multiplying, travel increasing, moral decay spreading, false prophets rising, and all of these happening simultaneously. For centuries, these prophecies seemed symbolic, metaphorical, impossible to take literally. But now they are unfolding in real time, not as vague predictions, but as precise descriptions of what is happening. The alignment is too specific to dismiss. And those who study prophecy with honesty see it clearly. Technology, conflicts, and social movements follow the same script. Prophecies warned of a system where no one could buy or sell without a mark. We now have digital currencies, biometric identification, social credit systems. Prophecies warned of weapons that could destroy the earth. We have nuclear arsenals capable of that. Prophecies warned of a one-world system of governance. We see the push for global governance through international organizations, treaties, and economic interdependence. Every piece is in place, not because prophecy caused it, but because prophecy foresaw the trajectory human systems would take when left to their own corruption and ambition. What was symbolic is becoming literal before our eyes. The beast, the mark, the tribulation. These were dismissed as metaphors by modern theologians who wanted to make faith palatable to a secular age. But prophecy does not bend to comfort, it reveals. And what it reveals is that the symbols were descriptions of real systems, real technologies, real events that would manifest when the time was right. And that time is now. The technology exists. The systems are in place. The cultural conditioning is complete. All that remains is the final convergence. And that convergence is closer than most are willing to admit. The alignment is not just Christian. Islamic eschatology describes similar signs. Hindu prophecies speak of the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and moral decay. Buddhist texts describe the decline of the Dharma. Indigenous traditions warn of earth changes and spiritual reckoning. Every tradition, every culture, every ancient wisdom source points to this time, and they all describe similar patterns: corruption of leadership, breakdown of natural order, loss of spiritual connection, acceleration of chaos. These are not coincidences, these are confirmations. Different languages describing the same reality, different perspectives seeing the same convergence. The specificity of the prophecies is what makes them undeniable. It is not just that bad things will happen. Bad things always happen. It is the combination, the simultaneity, the global scope, the technological enablement, the spiritual blindness, the false peace followed by sudden destruction, the deception so convincing that even the elect would be deceived if possible. These details were written thousands of years ago, and they describe today with precision, not vaguely, not symbolically, literally. And the more you study them, the more you see the alignment, and the more you see it, the harder it becomes to ignore. But most people do not study prophecy. They dismiss it as superstition, as fear-mongering, as outdated mythology, and that dismissal is itself prophesied. Scoffers will come in the last days, saying, "Where is the promise of his coming? For all things continue as they were." But all things are not continuing. The acceleration is undeniable. The convergence is clear. And the prophecies are aligning not because someone is forcing them to, but because they were accurate descriptions of patterns that would inevitably emerge when humanity reached this level of technological power and moral corruption. The question is not whether the prophecies are coming true. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is what you will do with that knowledge. Will you prepare? Will you align yourself spiritually with truth? Will you position yourself to endure what is coming? Or will you dismiss it, ignore it, and be caught unprepared when the final events unfold? Because the prophecies are not just warnings, they are roadmaps. And those who take them seriously have the advantage of foresight in a world stumbling blind into judgment. Subscribe to this channel now if you want to understand how these prophecies connect to current events and what comes next. Many think everything is normal or cyclical, but it is not. This is the most dangerous delusion of our time. The belief that history repeats, that crises come and go, that humanity always survives. And yes, humanity has survived previous crises, but this time is fundamentally different. The scale is global, the systems are interconnected, the technology is unprecedented, the spiritual disconnect is total. And yet, most people refuse to see the difference. They cling to the comfort of cyclical thinking because acknowledging the uniqueness of this moment requires a level of responsibility they are not willing to accept. So they normalize, they rationalize, they convince themselves that this is just another chapter in the endless cycle of history, but it is not. There is a collective spiritual disconnection happening. Humans have never been more disconnected from the divine, from nature, from each other, and from themselves. Religion has been reduced to ritual without power. Spirituality has been commercialized into self-help without transformation. Meaning has been replaced by distraction. Purpose has been replaced by consumption. And the result is a generation that feels empty, anxious, lost, but cannot identify why. Because the disconnection is so complete that they do not even remember what connection felt like. They have no reference point, no baseline, no memory of what it means to live with spiritual awareness. And without that memory, they cannot recognize what has been lost. The greater the darkness, the harder it becomes to perceive the danger. This is the paradox of spiritual blindness. The more blind you are, the less you recognize your blindness. You think you see clearly. You think you understand reality. You think you are informed, educated, awake. But you are seeing through filters that have been carefully constructed to keep you from seeing the truth. And the deeper you go into that constructed reality, the more convinced you become that it is real, and the more you defend it, and the more you attack anyone who challenges it. Because your entire identity is built on that illusion. And if the illusion shatters, you shatter with it. So you protect the illusion at all costs, even when the evidence against it is overwhelming. The systems are designed to maintain the blindness. Education does not teach critical thinking. It teaches obedience. Media does not inform. It conditions. Entertainment does not inspire. It numbs. Technology does not connect, it isolates. Every system that shapes modern consciousness is engineered to keep you spiritually blind, not because of a single conspiracy, but because spiritual blindness serves every power structure. A blind population does not resist, does not question, does not seek truth. It consumes, obeys, and sleeps, and that is exactly what is needed to maintain control in a world on the brink of collapse. The inability to discern is epidemic. People cannot tell the difference between truth and propaganda, between authentic spirituality and manipulation, between freedom and control, between love and transaction. They have lost the ability to discern because discernment requires spiritual clarity, and spiritual clarity requires connection to something beyond the self, beyond the material, beyond the system. But that connection has been systematically severed, and now people are adrift, believing whatever narrative is repeated most loudly, following whatever voice promises the most comfort, defending whatever system gives them the illusion of safety. And they will continue doing this until reality crashes in so hard that illusion becomes impossible. But by then, it will be too late for preparation. Only reaction will remain. This blindness is not ignorance, it is willful, because the truth is available. The evidence is visible. The signs are clear, but seeing them requires courage, requires the willingness to admit you were wrong, requires the humility to acknowledge that you have been deceived, requires the strength to walk away from systems, relationships, and beliefs that have defined you. And most people would rather remain blind than pay that price, so they choose comfort over truth, security over freedom, illusion over reality, and they call that choice wisdom. But it is cowardice. And it will not protect them when the illusion collapses. The spiritual blindness is the greatest danger, not the external threats, not the collapsing systems, not the wars or disasters. The greatest danger is that people will not see any of it coming. They will be caught completely off guard. They will have no spiritual foundation to stand on when everything else crumbles. And they will be swept away. Not because they were unlucky, but because they chose blindness when sight was still possible. Comment below and tell me, do you see the spiritual blindness around you, or are you still convinced that most people are awake and aware? The fight is not just political or ideological, it is spiritual. Every conflict you see on the surface has roots in a battle that is invisible, the wars between nations, the divisions within societies, the collapse of institutions, the corruption of leaders. All of it is manifestation of a deeper war, a war between truth and deception, between light and darkness, between forces that seek to elevate humanity and forces that seek to enslave it. And most people do not see this war because they have been taught to see only the material, to believe only what can be measured, photographed, or explained by science. But the most important battles are fought in realms that cannot be seen with physical eyes. Invisible forces shape decisions, behaviors, and trends. You think you make your own choices. You think your opinions are your own. You think your desires are authentic. But how many of your beliefs were planted by systems designed to shape you? How many of your fears were manufactured to keep you compliant? How many of your desires were engineered to keep you consuming? The invisible forces do not need to control you directly. They only need to control the environment. And in that controlled environment, your choices become predictable, your behaviors become programmable, and you believe you are free even as you perform exactly as designed. This is the hidden battle, not for your body, for your mind, for your soul. Those who do not understand this war end up fighting on the wrong side. They fight for causes they think are righteous without seeing who benefits. They defend systems they think are just without seeing the corruption underneath. They attack people they think are enemies without seeing that they are fellow prisoners. Because the real enemy is not flesh and blood, it is the principalities and powers operating through institutions, ideologies, and individuals. And if you cannot see the spiritual dimension, you will spend your life fighting shadows, while the real enemy operates unchallenged. You will exhaust yourself in battles that do not matter, while losing the war that does. The spiritual war has always been the true war. Everything else is theater. Politics is theater. Economics is theater. Culture wars are theater. They matter, yes. They have real consequences. But they are not the source. They are symptoms. The source is spiritual. And until you address the source, you are only managing symptoms. You are rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. You are applying bandages to a body that is bleeding internally, and the longer you focus only on the visible, the more ground you lose in the invisible. Because the enemy you cannot see is the enemy that will defeat you. And he knows that as long as you remain focused on the material, you will never recognize the true threat. The tools of this war are not weapons. They are lies, deception, confusion, division, fear. The goal is not to destroy you physically, it is to destroy you spiritually, to disconnect you from truth, to isolate you from community, to fill you with despair, to make you believe that resistance is futile, that evil is too strong, that hope is naive. And once you believe that, you stop fighting, you surrender. Not because you were defeated in battle, but because you were convinced that the battle was already lost. And that is how the enemy wins. Not through force, through deception. Every major decision in the world right now is influenced by this battle. Leaders who seem incompetent are not just incompetent. They are influenced by forces they do not understand or have willingly submitted to. Systems that seem broken are not just broken. They are being dismantled to make way for something else. Narratives that seem insane are not just insane. They are designed to confuse, to overwhelm, to make you give up trying to discern truth. And the more you dismiss the spiritual dimension, the more vulnerable you are to these tactics. Because you are trying to fight a spiritual war with material weapons. And that never works. The hidden battle is the only battle that matters, because if you lose spiritually, everything else you gain is meaningless. You can win politically and lose your soul. You can win financially and lose your purpose. You can win socially and lose your truth. But if you win spiritually, even if you lose everything else, you remain intact. You remain connected to the source of all strength, all truth, all hope. And that connection is what the enemy fears most, because a spiritually awake person cannot be controlled, cannot be deceived, cannot be defeated. And that is why the battle to keep you blind is so intense. Comment below and tell me, do you see the spiritual dimension of what is happening? Or do you still think this is just politics and economics? People believe technology can solve everything. There is a faith in technological progress that borders on religious. The belief that every problem has a technological solution, that innovation will always save us, that science will find the answer, that human ingenuity will overcome any obstacle. And this faith is not based on evidence. It is based on decades of conditioning. Decades of being told that technology is progress, that progress is inevitable, that the future will always be better than the past. But that narrative is a lie. Technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or evil. And right now, the trajectory is clear. Technology is being used to control, to surveil, to manipulate, to enslave, not to liberate. But while the world seems more connected, we are more fragile. The systems that sustain modern life are incredibly complex and interdependent, and complexity breeds fragility. A single point of failure can cascade into total collapse. The power grid, the financial system, the supply chain, the internet infrastructure. All of it is held together by systems that are stretched to their limits, poorly maintained, and vulnerable to disruption. And most people have no idea how fragile it all is. They assume that because things have worked for years, they will continue working. But that assumption is dangerous, because when these systems fail, and they will, the collapse will be sudden, total, and devastating. And technology will not save you. It will fail with everything else. Every structure that sustains modern comfort is unstable. Your access to food depends on supply chains that can break in days. Your access to water depends on infrastructure that is aging and underfunded. Your access to money depends on digital systems that can be shut down instantly. Your access to communication depends on networks that can be censored or destroyed. And none of this is hypothetical. It has happened before, and it will happen again. But on a scale we have not seen, because the world is more interconnected now than ever. And that interconnection means that when one system falls, it pulls others with it. The illusion of safety is built on the assumption of continuity, but continuity is not guaranteed. The safety you feel is an illusion constructed by convenience. You have never known hunger, so you assume food will always be available. You have never known blackout, so you assume power will always flow. You have never known system failure, so you assume everything will keep working. But your assumption is not based on resilience. It is based on luck, on the fact that you have lived in a brief window of stability that is not normal historically. And that window is closing. The signs are everywhere, the cracks are showing, and yet most people do not prepare. They do not even consider preparation, because the illusion of safety is so strong that it blinds them to obvious risk. This illusion is maintained deliberately, because a population that feels safe is a population that does not resist, does not prepare, does not take action. And when the collapse comes, that population is entirely dependent on whatever system emerges to replace the old one. And that dependence is control, total control. Because if you cannot feed yourself, if you cannot protect yourself, if you cannot think for yourself, then you will accept any conditions in exchange for survival. And that is the goal, not to destroy you, but to make you so dependent that you have no choice but to comply with whatever is demanded. And technology is the tool being used to create that dependence. The fragility is not a bug, it is a feature. Decentralized, resilient systems are hard to control, but centralized, fragile systems can be controlled with a single switch. And that is why every system is being centralized, why everything is moving digital, why cash is being eliminated, why local production is being replaced by global supply chains, why independence is being punished and dependence is being rewarded. Because fragile systems create vulnerable populations, and vulnerable populations are easy to manage, easy to direct, easy to sacrifice when necessary, and you are being made vulnerable deliberately, not by accident, by design. The illusion of safety is the most dangerous illusion of all, because it prevents you from taking action while action is still possible. It keeps you passive, comfortable, asleep. And by the time you realize the danger, it will be too late to prepare. The systems will have failed, the structures will have collapsed, and you will be left with nothing but regret. So the question is, will you wake up now while there is still time to prepare? Or will you cling to the illusion until reality shatters it for you? Hit that like button if you see through the illusion and understand why preparation is not paranoia, it is wisdom. Every person is being called to look within right now. This is not a collective event that happens to everyone the same way. This is personal, individual, specific. You are being called through circumstances, through insights, through disruptions, through this very message. The call is not loud, it is not dramatic. It is a quiet knowing that something must change, that you cannot continue living the way you have been, that time is running out, and that you have a choice to make, not someday, not when things settle down, not when you are ready, now, because the call does not wait for your convenience. It comes when it is needed, and it is needed now. You cannot wait for the perfect moment to change. There is no perfect moment. There will always be reasons to delay. Work is busy, family needs you, finances are tight, the timing is not right. But those are excuses, not reasons. Because transformation never happens in perfect conditions. It happens when you decide that staying the same is more painful than changing. When you recognize that the life you are living is not the life you were meant for. When you understand that every day you delay is a day you will never get back, and that the consequences of inaction are far greater than the discomfort of action. The perfect moment is now, not because now is perfect, but because now is all you have. Time is shrinking and responsibility is individual. No one is coming to save you. No leader, no system, no external force. Your salvation, your transformation, your awakening is your responsibility. You cannot outsource it. You cannot delegate it. You cannot wait for someone else to do it for you, and the time you have to act is finite. Every day the window closes a little more. Every day the options narrow. Every day the difficulty increases, and at some point the window will close completely. And then there will be no more choices, only consequences. And you will live with those consequences for the rest of your life. So the question is, will you act while you still can? Or will you wait until action is no longer possible? The wake-up call is spiritual, not just practical. Yes, you need to prepare practically, but preparation without spiritual transformation is incomplete. You can stockpile resources, learn skills, build networks. But if your spirit is not aligned, if your soul is not awake, if your connection to truth is not solid, then all your preparation is fragile. Because the challenges ahead are not just physical, they are spiritual. They are designed to break you, to make you compromise, to make you give up. And if you are not spiritually strong, you will not endure. So the wake-up call is first and foremost a call to awaken spiritually, to reconnect with the divine, to align with truth, to purify your intentions, to strengthen your will, and only then does practical preparation make sense. Many people hear the call but do not respond. They acknowledge it. They agree with it intellectually. They say, yes, I know I need to change. But they do nothing. They go back to their routines. They sink back into distraction. They postpone action indefinitely. And every time they do that, the call becomes a little quieter. The urgency becomes a little duller. The clarity becomes a little hazier, until eventually they stop hearing it altogether, and then they are truly lost. Because the call does not come forever. It comes when you need it. But if you ignore it repeatedly, it stops coming. And then you are left to navigate what is ahead without guidance, without clarity, without the strength that comes from responding when called. This is your moment, not tomorrow, not next week, not when things calm down. Now. You are reading this for a reason. This message found you because you needed to hear it, and what you do with it will determine the trajectory of your life from this point forward. You can dismiss it. You can rationalize it away. You can tell yourself you will think about it later, or you can act. You can make the decision right now to change, to wake up, to align with truth, to prepare spiritually and practically for what is coming. And that decision made today will be the most important decision you ever make, because it is the decision that determines whether you endure what is ahead or are swept away by it. The personal wake-up call is the final warning. It is the moment when you are given one last chance to choose differently, to step off the path that leads to destruction and onto the path that leads to life. And once this moment passes, once this opportunity is gone, it does not come back. So do not waste it. Do not ignore it. Do not postpone it. Respond now while you still can. Comment below and tell me, are you hearing the call and are you ready to respond, or are you still making excuses for why not now?